When pioneers moved to the west with courage strong, they met the test. They pushed their handcarts all day long, and as they pushed, they sang this song. For some must push and some must pull as we go marching up the hill. So merrily on the way we go until we reach the valley-o.
I hope that it's beneficial to anyone who will hear it, and that the stories that are told will touch the lives of people the way that they've touched my life and the life of the lives of the members of the River Wyoming Stake. This is Vale Crossing. Shortly after the acquisition of the Sun Ranch was completed, President Gordon B. Hinckley called and asked me if I could direct the stake in building a bridge across the Sweetwater. The bridge that originally was across the Sweetwater was right here on this location. However, it was an old railroad car that had been wrecked. It was bent and had no surface on it other than the steel, and was slippery when wet, and had no railings, and was only 10 feet wide. It was a bit of a fright for many people when they went across the bridge, because it looked like you were going to fall off into the bridge, into the river. However, there was ample room if you were careful in driving across the bridge that you never slipped off into the water. Nonetheless, President Hinckley desired that we construct a new bridge. That was quite an undertaking for the River Wyoming Stake, because it's 90 miles one direction to the bridge, and by the time that it was completed, there was over 8,000 man-hours of donated time in the construction of this bridge. The bridge is constructed from two railroad cars, the original car that was already here, a flatbed car that had been in a wreck, and one that John Creer from Farm Management purchased. The pilings were driven 4 on each side with a pile driver, and each one is rated to be able to hold 19 tons of weight. And so this bridge can withstand over 80 tons easily, and probably even more than that. The engineers indicate that it could take up to 100 tons of weight on the bridge. When we began to build the bridge, our chief bridge builder, Chuck Starks, wanted to ensure that the bridge was exactly right. He, the day that we set the rail cars, after they had pounded in the pilings and filled them with cement, we had 2 large cranes, one on each side of the Sweetwater. They lifted the original car up over the side of the car that we had placed, the new car, and set it on the far side of the bridge so that the wrecked and damaged portions of the cars on both railroad cars would not show to the public. Brother Starks then had us tape the bridge diagonally from corner to corner to ensure that it was square. When we were doing that, the thought came to my mind, as well as everyone else who was there, is how in the world can we get these wrecked railroad cars square? We were within 3 inches, however, and I thought that was close enough, but Brother Starks insisted that we lift the cars again and reset them. We did that a number of times, I think 4 or 5 times, until we had the bridge within 1/4 of an inch of being perfectly square. That was the beginning of the exactness with which this bridge was built. The brethren who worked on this bridge primarily consisted of those from the River Wyoming Stake, also assisted by a member or 2 from the Casper Wyoming Stake and some from the Rock Springs Stake. The bridge took many hours. It was built in the winter of 1996 and 97, and many times the brethren were out here in the freezing cold with the snow blowing, ice chunks floating down the river, and they were very cold laying on that steel. For sleeping and eating, they slept in what is now the visitor center on concrete floors. It used to be the old bunkhouse, or the old ranch house, and the brethren would sleep there and cook their meals there, and they would sleep in sleeping bags on the floor in the old ranch house. They never once complained about the conditions the working environment or the cold. They were just grateful for the opportunity to build a bridge. It seemed like it was taking an extra long amount of time to build the bridge. Brother Starks had set the cars 6 feet apart so that the bridge in overall width would be 26 feet in width, so that 2 cars could pass freely on the bridge. The 6-foot span between the 2 cars had to be fixed so that it also would bear the weight of anything that crossed the bridge. Brother Starks began by first building, he and Brother Fabricius, a tram that went underneath the bridge so that they could work on the bottom part of the bridge and put the girders into the bridge to build the support and strength that the bridge needed. There are 26 cross members in the bridge, and it took about 2 days for 4 men to put each one in. I was wondering why, and I talked to Brother Fabricius one day at church, and he said, the reason is because Chuck is making us put everything back. I said, I don't understand. So I went out to see, and you can look underneath the bridge, and where they had to cut the body of the cars to put in the girders, Brother Starks made them save the little 2x3 pieces of steel, and then once the girder was in, re-weld those little pieces of steel back into the bridge. I asked Brother Starks why in the world we were doing that, because it really added no strength to the bridge, but it was only cosmetic and that no one would ever see it. Brother Starks turned to me and said, we are building this bridge for the Lord at the request of the prophet. This bridge will be perfect in every way as best as we can make it. That is the way the brethren proceeded. That same day I stood on the bridge with Brother Starks and watched the ice flow down the river, large chunks of ice. Each time our bridge builders were out there and they stood and watched that ice flow down. Excuse me. Emotions were pretty close to the surface because, of course, they remembered the boys in the Sweetwater with ice carrying the members of the Martin Handcart Company across the Sweetwater River. That day, as we watched the ice flow down the river, Brother Starks, with tears in his eyes, said, President, we're building this bridge so that no one will ever have to get in that water again. As the bridge progressed, the brethren came to me one day and said, President Lorimer, we want to name the bridge. Each crossing of the Sweetwater River has a name. They're not very creative. There's 8 crossings, so there's the 1st, 2nd, 3rd, 4th, 5th, 6th, 7th, and 8th, or last crossing of the Sweetwater. I asked them jokingly, I said, well, what do you want to name it? 1.5, because that bridge is between the 1st and the 2nd crossing of the Sweetwater River. They said no, that they wanted to name it in honor of the 4 boys who carried members of the Martin Handcart Company out. I thought about that for a while and went back to them and said, you know, if we put somebody's name on here, we'll forget somebody. They looked at me a little puzzled, and so I explained further. I said, you know, if you put their names on there, what about Captain Martin? What about Captain Willie? What about Levi Savage? What about Brigham Young? What about all those who sacrificed so much that those people could reach the valley? I said, let's don't put anybody's name on it. I, in contradiction of that, came back and said, why don't we call it Starks Crossing? Because Brother Starks was the man who was in charge of the project from our stake. And Starks in German means strong. Brother Starks would have nothing to do with it. I changed it then to La Starks, because Bishop Larson had also done a lot of work on it, and that would make it French, the Strong Bridge. They both said, please don't put our names on it. We therefore formed a committee to name the bridge. The committee members worked diligently to try to find an appropriate meaning for the bridge, an appropriate name. I told them that I wanted it to be symbolic of the link and the connection between the Riverton, Wyoming stake and the people of today with the handcart pioneers of the Martin and the Willie handcart companies. One day, after extensive research, the committee met. They had names like Celestial, Temple, all kinds of names. One little sister came in a quiet moment, and she said, "President Lorimer, the bridge needs to be called Vale Crossing." The minute that she said that, I got goosebumps on my arms, and I knew that she was right. She had read a talk given by President Hinckley during the events of the Second Rescue when he stated, quote, "During the events of the Second Rescue, people were allowed to reach across the veil and touch each other from both sides of the veil," close quote. The bridge therefore became known as Vale Crossing, or a connection between us and the pioneers of 1856, or of any pioneer heritage. The bridge then was named. It needed a proper marking. The first thought was that we would just simply put a sign there that said Vale Crossing. But the more we thought about it, we wanted it to be something special. The Riverton, Wyoming stake therefore ordered 2 large stones from St. Cloud, Minnesota granite. They came, they're approximately 6 feet tall each and have a panel. On the panel going to the north, or crossing the bridge the first time, it reads Vale Crossing, and then under that it says Rescue of 1856. On the other side of the bridge it says Vale Crossing, Second Rescue, 1992. So as you cross the bridge going towards Martin's Cove, you're going back in time. You see things exactly the way the pioneers saw them when they went into Martin's Cove, or as all the pioneers saw that valley as they came west. When you cross back across the bridge, you come back into our time, our responsibilities and our challenges, and although they're similar, they're very different. We believed that the naming of the bridge was significant, and it has affected many, many people. The bridge was dedicated that summer by the Riverton, Wyoming Stake Presidency. In addition to that, there are some other stories about the bridge that I think are kind of interesting. Brother Ron Fabricius, as he finished his last welds on the bridge, he had purchased a brand new pair of Handcart coveralls when he first started on the bridge, and when he got there and was finished with the bridge, the coveralls were completely in rags because of all of the slag that had come off of the end of his welding rod. He took the Handcart coveralls off, some of these are kind of hard to talk about, and he walked over to the fire. We had a fire there to stay warm, and he reverently laid his coveralls on the fire. One of the missionaries that was there asked why he had done that, as they observed him standing with his head bowed, reverently watching his coveralls burn up. The response was this: my son Corey, he's on a mission in England, and they have a tradition there that When they complete the first year of their mission, they burn one of their American suits as symbolic of being halfway done. He further stated, "I'm a convert to the church, so was never privileged to serve a mission. But in a way, these coveralls are my mission suit, and I now have completed this portion of my mission." People come from all over everywhere and want to see Vale Crossing. Non-members want to know about the Vale. They want to know, is there really life after death? One day, when the welders were working on the bridge and finishing the railings, Chuck Starks was on one side of the bridge and Ron Fabricius was on the other. Chuck needed something off of Ron's welding truck, and he said, "I wish Ron was here." To his amazement, Ron ran across the bridge and asked what he wanted. Chuck said, "How in the world did you hear me?" They played around with it for a while and determined that the sound had traveled up the big 6-inch tubes that go across the bridge as a railing and come down where Ron was working on the other side of the bridge. Because of that experience, they did not seal the caps on the bridge. Now, members of the River Wyoming Stake and thousands of others enjoy the opportunity of talking across the Vale as they whisper through the pipe to one another and talk across the Sweetwater River or across Vale Crossing. There's many other things about Vale Crossing, but I think that pretty well sums it up.
They pushed their handcarts all day long, and as they pushed, they sang this song. For some must push and some must pull as we go marching up the hill. So merrily on the way we go until we reach the valley, oh.